Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of A Day in the Future, the place where curiosity acts as fuel in helping us discover what the future holds in terms of innovation and technology. Today we have the great pleasure of discussing with an inventor, an entrepreneur, a speaker, an innovator at its finest. He's been selected as part of Forbes 30 Under 30 Europe in 2016. He's been head of innovation at a global automotive company, and he is now solving a problem that has been solved the same way for the past 1,000 years. Quite a big problem. The product through which he is doing that has received the Best of Best Design Awards in 2021 from Red Dot Awards, which is huge. And he represents an inspiration for what meaningful vision coupled with a stubborn attitude can achieve. Most importantly, he does that right from here, from Cluj, Romania, where I also live, and I find it so inspiring to be able to talk with him today. So, who are we talking with? Cornel Amariei, CEO of Lumen, a company that empowers blind people to live better lives. And the topic of our discussion will be how technology can enhance the human experience of life. Something that his company is doing right now with people that need it the most. Hi Cornel, thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk about how technology can enhance the human experience of life. So, simple question that we start with. What's the first piece of technology that comes to mind when thinking about human augmentation for you?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I think my answer will not be the most popular, but I think it's the one which has the most impact. Today, the number one technology for human augmentation is the iPhone. You have it all the time. It enables you to do things which you were not able to do like 15 years ago when it was first released. And of course, everybody, when you're talking about human augmentation, thinks about exoskeletons, thinks about implants, thinks about things which are very, very intrusive to the human body. And definitely it's going into that direction. But today, the simple level of worldwide use of technology enhancing humans is a smartphone. So starting from there, future is going to be very, very interesting.
We're going to get into the future as well, like the capabilities or the next level of communication that this device will provide in the future. It's astonishing. But what do you think was one of the first examples in history of human augmentation technology in history? Like go back as much as you want.
I mean, without going what happened when we didn't have literacy or anything like that, just looking a bit into modern history, I think the Industrial Revolution was the moment when technology became widely adapted. The steam engine created the Industrial Revolution, the first Industrial Revolution, which really augmented what humans were capable to do. And then with time, multiple examples, the first assembling line with what Henry Ford did in the beginning of the 1900s, and with time, more and more of technology enabling humans to do more things. So even if now by modern standards we think of things which are incredibly intrusive to the human body, historically wise, we have been augmented what humans can do since day one, since we invented the wheel. I would discussable since inventing the fire, because that I think was a discovery more than an invention. Mm-hmm. But undoubtedly, we have been using technology to augment what humans can do for tens of thousands of years. Now, my history lesson stops in the year zero, so before that, I'm not really aware of what happened on the right periodical timeline. However, started with the invention of the wheel, up to smartphones and more today, I think are the things which really augmented what humans can do.
You know what? The earliest invention, the earliest human enhancement tool are actually the ones that you're using right now. Eyeglasses. Okay, there were weapons before, but eyeglasses a few hundred years ago, first human enhancement technology, because you are able to see better through a tool. So it's really interesting.
It really depends on what you mean by human enhancement. If it's about enhancing what a human can do, any tool we ever developed was it would suit that category, because it was enhancing what a human strength can do, what a human sensory system could do, etc. I think that if we think from a sensory perspective, eyeglasses might be one of it, but it's actually not even true, because we have canes for blind people since thousands of years, and that is the same thing as an eyeglass. It's just that it's extending the range of a sensor which we have. The same with glasses; it enhances the vision of somebody which doesn't have proper vision.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you think about it, all technology is human enhancement technology. What
Some is human destruction technology, but discussable.
What I'm thinking about when looking at the subject of human enhancement, it's about, okay, what my body as a human individual, what can be enhanced in my experience of life, like enhancing vision, enhancing cognitive power, and we'll get into that as well. So anything that can make me, not going into comic books or something, but a superhuman in time. That's how I see it.
I mean, even superhuman or superhero or anything, it's a very, very, it's not an objective term. It's a very subjective term. So it means different things for everybody. So I think even the definition of enhancing can be very, very broad, and we can go very far with it.
Of course. So first thought was the smartphone. Okay. Now let's talk about how you are changing the world through human enhancement, and how did it start and what inspired you?
Sure. So to give a bit of context, I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Lumen, where we build glasses that empower the blind to live a better life. Now, to give a bit of why we did this and how everything happened, I was actually born in a family where both of my parents and my sister, so the entirety of my family except myself, have disabilities. Both of my parents have locomotive disabilities. They cannot walk without aid. And my sister has advanced mental disabilities. So growing up in such a family, you can imagine that things were a bit different. I couldn't do the same things that maybe you did with your parents. My parents, for example, never came to a teacher-parent meeting, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I never learned sports from my parents. I wasn't able to do a lot of things which were common for other children of my age. At the same time, of course, I had very limited means. And at the same time, I was living in an environment which was heavily adjusted for the locomotive disabilities of my parents. So I couldn't, my house was very, very different, and the house of my colleagues and everything. That made me incredibly curious, and I discovered many, many years later that from curiosity to innovation, it's a path. But getting back to what we do now, roughly 3 years ago, I founded a company, Lumen, which, as I said, builds glasses which empowers the blind to live a better life, based on my experience living with people with disabilities for most of my life. And based on a problem which says there are 40 million people which are blind now, and the number is heavily increasing. But if you look at what solutions are out there, you'll only, specifically when it comes to the mobility of the blind, you'll only find two, and that is the guide dog and the white cane. Now, the guide dog as a solution is unanimously well seen by its functionality. So what it does great. But it has a few drawbacks. To train a single guide dog, it can reach up to $60,000 or even more today. And to take care of a guide dog as a single blind individual is too much responsibility. You have to spend 1 to 1.5 and even 2 hours a day only to take care of the guide dog without the benefits that you are receiving from it. So it's simply too much responsibility for a blind person. And because of these two major drawbacks, there are only 28,000 guide dogs to 40 million blind people. Simply put, great solution, not a scalable solution. But here's where we come in. We use technology to replicate the main features of a guide dog without the drawbacks that make the guide dog a non-scalable solution. So what do? Basically, if you have a guide dog, you can ask the guide dog to take you to an empty seat, take you to the door, take you to the stairs, or if they really, really know the route, take you back home. And the guide dog will do this by pulling your hand, avoiding you from obstacles, keeping you safe, stopping you at doors, stopping you at the pedestrian crossings, keeping you on the pedestrian sidewalk, etc. And as mentioned, it will do it by pulling your hand. That's the main feedback mechanism that the guide dog gives you. Using the Lumen glasses, which we developed, you can ask exactly the same commands, and it can do exactly what a guide dog does, but even more, but with one main difference. If the guide dog pulls your hand, we actually pull your head. What does it mean? You actually feel how something is holding your head, and it's pulling you in a direction you have to go. It's immensely, immensely intuitive. We tested with over 200 blind individuals. It's our patented, and we just got a patent granted now, technology all over the world. And it's immensely intuitive, uses no hands. I would argue it's more intuitive than somebody pulling your hand. And it's for the first time in history when a technical solution can replicate what only a guide dog or a human companion can do. It was never before possible. It was possible starting with January 2021 when we proved it was possible and we patented it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Like these are the type of breakthroughs in human enhancements that, yeah.
And one of them happened in Cluj.
Yeah.
On a hill over there.
Yeah, like I get shivers when you say that.
It's we actually very funny internal story. What we do is absolutely life-changing, and we see how it's changing the lives of people. But it's so much more visible for the people outside than for the people inside. For us inside, at the end of the day, what we do changes the lives of people, but it's still work. It's still something which we do every day, and it's the least monotone thing in the world. But at some point, motivation will always drop, and we're always searching for the next great big goal to cover. And after we prove something as big as that, of course, there are multiple other issues which are proving, and we have proved, and we prove the work and everything. But every now and then, we kind of forget what we do. And it just happened that 4 months ago, I was going to some old videos, and I found the video when the first blind person in the world was directed or was guided by a technological system. Never before that was possible. And in that video, I have one of my colleagues, Dr. Robert, and the moment when that was possible, he just burst into laughter. And we transformed that laughter when we made a video of it and everything. We transformed it into an internal campaign we called Make Robert Smile Again, which is now the next goal which we have in our company. We have multiple goals. And now the first one, which we're proving in a few weeks, is Make Robert Smile Again, based on a video from January 2021, when his reaction on when something which was believed to be impossible was possible. He was seeing it with his own eyes. And I can't publicly share the video. Maybe I'll show just you the video in a few minutes. But it's absolutely amazing when technology was able to do something which nobody thought it was possible before.
Again, like shivers, but talk about creative KPIs.
Yeah, there's we measure them in number of smiles, we measure them in breakthroughs, we measure them in how we're enhancing the lives of people.
Yeah, so what I was saying, like the number of times you make Robert smile, like that's a nice KPI. I had one question. Sure. Why is the number of blind people increasing at such an accelerating pace?
So right now we have, officially, we don't even know exactly how many blind people. Mm-hmm. Sorry, officially we know, unofficially we don't know. Officially, there are 42 million blind people, 43 million blind people now. Depends who you're asking. The UN says one thing, the World Health Organization says another thing, and they're actually competing with who has the bigger number. There might be roughly 60 million blind people today, and roughly 290 million people who have some reminders of vision, but the reminders are so low that it is affecting their mobility. So roughly what we do at Lumen is not only targeting those 40 to 60 million blind, it's also targeting over 100 to 200 million people with very low vision. Mm-hmm. The number is increasing because of, if you look historically, there is a prevalence. The prevalence is the percentage of people having a specific, in this case, disability. The disability of people with blindness is actually decreasing, but the worldwide population is increasing much more. So only if we keep the same percentage, roughly 0.5% of people are blind, so 1 in 200 people, we are rapidly increasing that. On top of that, we have an aging population. So the expectancy of life has really increased, and one of the issues which is happening with aging is that your vision is very, very bad. So that's another reason why we have that. Otherwise, in terms of eye care and everything, it's better now than it was 50 years ago or 40 or 30 years ago. So it's actually, the prevalence is decreasing, but the number of people in the world are increasing, and the age of the population is also increasing, resulting into multiple people being blind than they were before. However, there's still accident-wise diseases which are not controllable at this point or solvable at this point, lack of treatment and everything, that also leads to the majority of blind individuals.
Understood. I was curious, are there any... So the human lifestyle has significantly changed in the past 100 years, I would say. So are there any new ways of living life that, through technology, that affects people increasingly, so that the blindness factor, because that's something that I thought that
visual impairment maybe. I don't have numbers from the top of my head, but yes, we get worse vision now because we spend most of our time in close proximity to a screen, but it's not leading to blindness, and it's not leading to severe visual impairment. The amount of people who have went to severe visual impairment from overusing screens, that's still very, very low. I think accident-wise, because even in the past 200, 300 years ago, there are enough accidents which could lead to blindness or to severe visual impairment. Those have decreased due to better safety standards.
Understood.
There's still, unfortunately, a lot of people being born blind, and it's something which can't properly be diagnosed before months after you're born.
Mm-hmm. Okay, understood. What inspired you when thinking about the solution? Where did you can just guide me through the journey, like even emotional, even however you want it. Just describe the journey.
Sure. It all started roughly 10 or 11 years ago. I was a second-year student in university in Germany, And in a conversation with a friend, we got to the expression glasses for the blind. And we began Googling randomly got to the conversation. We began Googling and we couldn't find anything. But we found the problem and how big it was, and it was increasing. And we began researching and we found out the guide dog, the solution, which we believe was like universal. It was not. It was just a stereotype that's universal, just a marketing, it's universal, but it's not a scalable solution. And even back then in 2013, when we first invented Lumen, we began working on some prototypes, and we quickly, the first idea that we had on Lumen was, let's try to replicate what vision does with other sensors, like somatosensory touch system, or electrostimulation or other things. So we began working into that, and we actually had some working prototypes, but it was very clear they worked marvelously in the lab, but it was not something which you could scale. And we also found there were 600 other papers doing something like that. Unfortunately, everybody tried, and some even continue trying, to replicate what vision does using other senses, using auditory senses, using somatosensory sensing. Unfortunately, it is not possible. Simply, vision has such a large bandwidth that you cannot replicate it as much as you compress it with other senses. But what was very clear for us, and that's when when the idea actually clicked, was that we should stop trying to replicate what vision does. We should stop trying to take visual information and compress it and send it, but we should find what is relevant information. And for us, the solution for that was the guide dog. Why? If I'm here and I have a table in front of me and I have a door over there, if I want to go to the door, do I care there's a table here? I only care to go around it.
Yeah.
That's the relevant information. How do I go around? Not that there's a table here, but how I go around it to get to the door. And coming from these very, very simple premises, that's what the guide dog does. The guide dog will never tell me I'm in a room with 5 cameras and with some lights and with some microphones. The guide dog will just get me out of the room. So that's what the mindset flip which we had back then. However, it was not technically possible to be implemented there. I mean, this was 2013. AI was not even in discussion at that point. It was existing, but the performance and the hardware was not available to do what we needed. Back then, it would have weighed 400 kilograms, something which now we do and we can put on your head because of the amount of computing and the algorithms which had to advance, especially in the AI sector. And what we told ourselves, okay, it's clear that it's not possible today, but the moment we're going to find it possible, let's start it. And back in 2019, end of 2019, there were the first glimpses that technology might catch up enough so that in a few short years we could deliver something like that. And that was my bet. I think this is the right time, let's do it. We started it. Now we're in 2023 and it's technically possible, and it is in a few weeks in a clinical investigation. So the bet worked.
What were the glimpses in 2019? What
some advancements in the area of AI in hardware.
The capabilities and
capabilities
how
of hardware and how AI advanced. I mean, the first time we proved it was possible was 2020, but we proved it was possible from with some of the assumption proven. And the biggest one is that the technological system can guide blind individual, and that we proved marvelously. Well, I never expected that the first iteration could work so well. That we're still using exactly the same code, exactly the same settings as we did in January 2021. And it worked the same. I mean, we got so lucky with everything the first time. But in 2020, when we began developing the system, the robotics world was advanced enough even in 2013, except for the AI part, which was not. So in 2021, we began understanding that, yes, it is possible with AI, but it would be incredibly slow. I mean, the first iterations which we were building, we are famous for the glasses, but what very few people know that except of the glasses back then, there was also a very large hipset, we called it, a belt which you had to put, where there were the batteries, which are like chunky batteries, and the computing unit. And that was like a 2-kilogram backpack which you had to wear connected to the glasses. The glasses were the sensor and the feedback, and then there was the hipset. So it was working even back then. But it was not really pleasant. I mean, to ask a blind person to put 2 things on and a cable between them was not easy. But we were actually thinking if we can even sell that with 2 units. We determined that we couldn't. We could, but it would get too expensive and it wouldn't be very easy to use. But the moment when it all got integrated into a single product was the end of last year. So we were able to integrate everything into one last product, and that was because of our great collaboration with NVIDIA and with Intel. I mean, we have access to things which are not commonly available at this point. And because of those collaborations, we were able to embed everything into something very, very small, something which is just one device, you put it on and it works. And that's something which we achieved at the end of last year, and now we're beginning the clinical investigation for it.
Wonderful. I'm really curious, how did you come up with that beautiful design, and if you tested it, and how did you come up with that?
That was, I always tell this story, and I really love the story. So basically, at the beginning in 2020, I think it was 2020 when we were developing it, and it was the prototypes were so horrible to wear. I mean, we have photos of people putting like toilet paper on their nose so they got more comfortable. But that was what it was back then. It was very, very heavy. It was not really that comfortable. And somebody told me, hey, I think I know a guy who can help you with that. I was like, okay, let's see. And they present me Professor Dr. Ciprian, to give his full name. He also has some other names, but that's how I call him. And I tell him, hey, this is what we do. Do you want to help? And he says yes. And he's an industrial designer, which means he draws a lot and everything. He's a professor at the local arts and design university.
Mm-hmm.
And I explained him, I gave him the brief of what we need. These are the components he has to fit all of this, etc., etc. And I think he came back in like 2 weeks with 100 sketches or something like that. And they looked very good, but they were horrible. They had nothing to do with what we actually needed. I mean, they were inspired from everything, but from technology aimed at helping people.
Mm-hmm.
Some looked as UFOs, some looked as... I have to show the photos. They had nothing to do with this. But it was a glimpse of something which I really enjoyed, but I couldn't really name what it was. So I told him, okay, this is crap. But I think there's something which we can do together. However, if you want us to continue, you have to do the following things. For the following week, 4 hours a day, you must be blindfolded. So you must really understand a disability. And for the other 4 hours a day, you must spend with blind individuals. And he agreed, and he did it. We organized everything, he did it. And in the following weekend, he drew again. And they were marvelous, what he sent me. He spent like 70 sketches drawing in one weekend. And they were marvelous. And out of them, the team, everybody voted, and we selected 8 versions. Those 8 versions, we 3D printed, we put weights in them, and we sent them to blind individuals to fill them and to say, okay, which shape do you think suits best? And most of them agreed to one shape, which remained our industrial design line, our design line of the product. And, we continue to iterate at this point. We have iterated like 200 times that design. But at some point in 2021, at the beginning, I think, we published the design. So we say, hey, this is how it's going to look. And we do that. It's all good. And a few months later, I get an email from Red Dot, which is the largest association for industrial design in the world. And the email was starting with congratulations. That's the first reason I read it, actually. And it says that, congratulations, you are officially one of the 40 Red Dot Best of the Best awardees of 2021. So now to explain Red Dot a bit. The Red Dot award, which you find on products, there are 4,000 products a year which get that. So not that exclusive. The best of the best, that's only 40 which get it, and half of them are Apple. So yeah, we were there with Apple. But there was also something else written. It was written that you also are now part of the finalist 5 companies, 5 industrial design studios, competing for the Red Dot Luminary Award, which is the highest industrial design award in the world. And there's a process which is starting now with interviews and with due diligence and everything. And so we started that process. We found out who are the other competitors, and the one which I really appreciated was the Spaceship Unity from Virgin Galactic, the thing which took Richard Branson into space. We were competing with that. And, we did everything we could, and then a while passed, and there was the World Finals, which were, because of COVID, were held online. And there I go online in the ceremony, and comes the head of the jury of Red Dot comes to announce the finalists, and then he begins with a description which was kind of vague, and we're not sure is that us? Is it not? But then he said that the most important industrial design in the world in 2021 was made by us, by Romania, by a country which has nothing to do with industrial design, and the Lumen glasses got awarded as the best industrial design in the world in 2021, which was, of course, amazing. We never expected. It was never in our direction of winning something like this, but it happened. But at the same time, that made Ciprian be one of the best industrial designers in the world. But here's the interesting thing. Ciprian was always one of the best industrial designers in the world. He never knew. He never had the context to prove himself. He never had the occasion to show how good he was. And that's one of the things I think we do very good at Lumen. We build the context for people to do the best work of their life. And one of the things which I learned at Lumen is that ordinary people in the right context can do extraordinary deeds. Ciprian was always one of the best industrial designers in the world. He never knew. I have 4 colleagues from Lumen which were on the cover of Forbes magazine already, in 2 different magazines, actually on 2 different covers of Forbes magazine. Before that, they were engineers like most of us in various companies. We created the context for people to do the best work of their lives, and for their work to be appreciated by millions and millions of people. And yes.
Yeah. No, it's inspiring. I just think that you just showed how important it is to understand the problem when designing something. Like that week in which he truly went into the experience of the problem, that sparked some really nice ideas, I believe.
No, I mean, design completely changed that week, and we continuously do that. In the company, every new person we hire goes to a sensibility course. What's a sensibility course? We have Professor Dr. Marian, which is I would say the number 1 disability expert in Romania. He was actually blind for 21 years of his life until a cataract surgery partially recovered his vision. And he went to blind school. He went to university being blind. That's when he got a surgery and partially recovered his vision. He taught as a professor at the blind school, I think locally, and also in another city in Romania. And he developed this sensibility course in which he teaches us how it is to be blind. So every new person in the company goes through a sensibility course in like the first week, pending Marian's vacation, because he's the only one doing it. So basically what we do is we begin with experiencing visual impairment issues, for example, glaucoma or cataract or other problems. So we have some special glasses we put on, and it distorts our vision into seeing how hard it is to have certain visual impairments. And we don't do it in the office. He sends people around town to purchase things, with him being there for safety reasons, while having these glasses on. And then he completely blindfolds us, and he makes us do everything. We washed clothes, we went cooking, we went to the cinema, we traveled the city. If at any point you see some people in Lumen uniform blindfolded, they're in the sensibility course, and also with white canes, they experience what it is to be blind. So we do that periodically with everybody. Everybody goes through a sensibility course every now and then in order to remember what we are actually solving. And I remember the first time we did a course. The beginning of the company, I remember seeing the power of habit. For some reason, I was not blindfolded, but everybody was. And Marian told one of our colleagues, which was blindfolded, he gave him some cups and he said, go to the bathroom and wash them. And that guy went to the bathroom, and the first reaction he had when he went to the bathroom blindfolded was to search for the light switch to turn on the lights. I mean, the power of habit is absolutely incredible. So it's so hard to really understand the disability. It's so hard to understand it. And we continuously train ourselves to understand it more and more and more, but it's still incredibly hard. We have the immense luck that we can work with a tremendous amount of blind individuals, which are helping us with their feedback and with testing our technology and everything, and we continue to do that more and more. But it's still so difficult to understand some things.
How valuable do you find this type of course, and why? And in what type of results within the company at an organizational level or across how teams are working is it showing? Because I find it so valuable to really understand what problem you're solving, and for everyone to have.
One of the like in the mantra of startups, of course, you must start from a problem, and that's what I also always encourage. But usually it's preferred if it's a problem that you feel on yourself. And most problems you could feel. I mean, I was working in a corporation, I saw this problem, okay, I know a better solution, and let's work on that. The issue here is that this is a problem that almost none of the team members have. We will not be able to develop the solution if we would have the problem. However, I know blind programmers, by the way. There are programmers which are blind. They don't have a screen. I mean, I went to their offices and they were like a keyboard, mouse, headphones, and a laptop, or in the laptop or the desktop, but there's no screen. I was like, how do you work? And they can with text-to-speech. They work very, very well, actually. Of course, they're not front-end programmers. They're back-end programmers, but it still works well. But for us, we couldn't have the problem in order to solve the problem. And that makes a huge barrier between the people having the problem and the people solving it. And that barrier is the reason why, if you look now in academia, there are 600, 700 people, 700 different research papers who attempted to solve or to come up with a solution, and they failed. I think we had two things which were different. One of with, was incredible motivation. We wanted to solve this. It was based on my personal stories, based on what I experienced in my life, living for 18 years of my life, surrounded only by people with disabilities. So that's where the motivation came. And the second thing is that we all experience it as much as possible. So we all test what we do. We all experience the sensibility courses. We all communicate with blind individuals, and we continue doing this. I mean, most of us, I would say, everybody at some point did it, but some of us, of course, much more, the people which are more forward-facing towards testing. Now that we grew the company to like roughly 60 people, we have people which don't necessarily go directly in the product development, but are of connex functions. But to answer your question, if you don't understand the problem well enough, chances of coming up with a solution which is good is close to nil. However, the problem which we are facing is so immensely complicated, not technically, but understanding it is so hard to understand blindness. As I was explaining with the exercise earlier, it's so hard to understand it. And you make assumptions that you understand it, but you don't. And in the end, it's just the feedback which we get at the end that really, and this is actually another interesting point, which is really difficult for us. Creativity for a person who doesn't have the visual senses is very different. I'm not saying they're not creative, they are, but they're creative in a way which is not related to visual senses. But all of the typical people which have vision, we are creative in a very visual way. So when you do user interviews, when you try to get feedback and everything, it's so different than trying to get feedback from a person which is typical, which doesn't have the specific disability. And that was really a challenge. It still is a challenge for some things, because to give an example, which I remember, not about our technology, but about the guide dog. I remember, testing the guide dog multiple times, having multiple blind individuals from Romania and abroad with guide dogs, showing me a lot of things. And by the way, there are very few guide dogs. In Romania, we only have 20 guide dogs.
20?
So I know all of them. I personally know all the guide dogs in Romania. And there's no officially accredited guide dog training school in Romania. There's one in Bulgaria. And I remember the blind people explaining me, the blind persons which have a guide dog, how well it works and everything. And then I tracked it. I tracked guide dogs working, and I saw how many mistakes the guide dog was able to do. A huge amount of mistakes. But I never knew that the guide dogs did those mistakes. Because at the end, the guide dog corrected them, or at some point, the guide dog just takes you somewhere where it doesn't know how to get back. So there are mistakes like that, which the guide dog does, and it's fully understandable. And this is a living being. I mean, it's depending on its mood, depending on how well it was fed, depending on a lot of things which are affecting our performance as humans. It's affecting the performance of the guide dog. But the blind individuals did not know that they were making those mistakes. Or another big problem which happens is, depending on how well trained the guide dog is, as every dog, they will attempt to eat food which they found on the ground or everything, even if they're not allowed to. And the blind person does not know that they do that. And they just end up going to the veterinary and finding some problems, everything much later than if they would be visually capable and see that the guide dog did something wrong. So all of those things, with a guide dog, which is an assistive technology, to a point, we experiment all of them with our technology, and we don't always get the proper feedback on how the technology was used and everything. Of course, we have 50 sensors in the glasses, and we record everything whenever the blind individuals agrees with it to get a feedback. But we get a qualitative feedback report from the blind saying the device didn't properly work because of this, and then we look at the data and the device was doing that, and we're trying to understand, okay, who is right? So it's a lot of challenges, which are perfectly understandable if you work in this industry with people with visual impairment, but so difficult in the path of developing a product for the blind.
You mentioned challenges. Can you describe some of the challenges? Because I suppose there were a lot of challenges in doing this. Some of the challenges, but describe them not necessarily like in specific actions, but how the emotions were at those times, and how you overcame them, or how you faced those challenges.
Trying to think of a good subject, a few good ones from which we can learn something. I mean, let me start from the beginning.
Yeah.
So we founded this company during COVID. 14th of May was the first day in Romania when COVID restrictions were out, and that's when we actually started the company. So we started the company then, remember moving the furniture, assembling the office and everything on the 14th of May. Only lasted like 2 weeks, because then we were back in curfew and everything, in home arrest, as we called it.
I remember.
Okay. But then we developed technology which we had to test.
Mm-hmm.
How do you test physical technology with people, with blind individuals, when there are restrictions of going out of your house? So the amount of work we had to do to prepare the laboratory for testing, to convince blind individuals that yes, it's safe to come. We have taken all of these precautions. We were dressed in those, isolation white, I don't know, combinezon in Romanian. I'm not sure how you call it in English. We were disinfecting the room with UV lamps and everything for them. I mean, we did a huge amount of precautions and of convincing blind individuals to come. And then half an hour before a testing session, we get a call that I'm not coming anymore. So because it's dangerous and everything. So examples like that.
Let me ask a question, because I
Sure.
think it will come up in a way that it just targets the subject perfectly. So when building on a great vision, because it is a big vision, like you need to have a commitment to that vision, and sometimes because it's so big, challenges might appear that might generate doubt. And I'm curious if you ever had those type of things in your
Sure.
journey, and how did you manage them?
I mean, I have doubt even today. I mean, I'm not saying that I have doubt about what we do. It's absolutely great and it works marvelously. But doubts always come in. I mean,
Exactly.
let's put this a bit into perspective. Romania doesn't have startups. You can say whatever you want. Romania doesn't have startups. We are the least innovative country in the EU proven European Innovation Scoreboard. So in the least innovative country in the European Union, some people come and say we want to build the most innovative company for assistive technologies in the world. So let's put that a bit into perspective. To find a startup is incredibly hard. So to found a startup is incredibly hard. So much work, so many unknowns, so many everything. And I'm talking about like an app doing something. That's incredibly hard. Now add hardware, it's 10 times harder. Then add medtech, 10 times harder. Then add the fact that we're working with people with vulnerable people, 10 times harder. Then it's in Romania, 10 times harder. Now multiply all of them. And this is what we do at Lumen. So statistically makes no sense why we exist. I mean, from a statistical standpoint, we are in the close to the worst possible places and everything for what we do in Europe. I mean, of course, there are worse places in the world to do this. But for us, we're absolutely borderline. However, there are some advantages. I mean, I don't think we could have done it in other places how we do it here, especially the testing part, regulatory and everything like that. I think that's a bit better here. Talent is absolutely incredibly here, up to a point, of course, but it's still incredible. So with that comes a ton of challenges, not only related to the product development, related to fundraising, related to finding the best people, related to getting the local credibility, getting the national credibility, getting the international credibility, because the biggest market is not here. I mean, we're not developing this only for Romania, we're developing this for the world, and Romania is one of the markets. And all of those combined, we're going through them. I mean, raising capital was difficult, and we raised more than anybody else. Finding people was difficult. Lumen is the company with the most applicants in Cluj, regardless of the size. I mean, every corporation in Cluj don't have as many applicants as we have, which because a different challenge. How do you find which are the best ones out of them? Because we get 1,000+ applicants per month. Being not endorsed, but being respected by investors or companies or potential stakeholders from abroad, because we're a Romanian company. I think you know this challenge as well. Very difficult. But in the end now we have badges which US companies don't have. So I think all of those challenges and doubts, will we ever raise capital? We raise more than anybody else. Will we ever get the right people? We have more people than anybody else. All of those doubts created challenges which, at least for me and for the people surrounding me, we're incredibly optimistic. And that's something which I realized, I think, last week. Last week I was in an innovation program in Romania with stakeholders from the state, stakeholders from local authorities and everything. And we went together, and I was the closing speech, let's put it this way. And all of the speeches before me was about doubt and about negativism. The state does not do that. You don't do that. You don't do that. We never did that. And I was the only one going there happy. I was the only person which had a happy attitude, optimistic attitude, and I think that we are incurable optimists in this company, because otherwise I can't explain how we got this far. When we see a challenge, none of us, of course we complain, everybody complains, but none of us stops and says we're not going to do that. No, when we see a challenge, that's what drives us to swear a little and then do it. And absolutely impossible challenges which we had. And I remember, we just had our third birthday 2 weeks ago. And I remember one of the colleagues, which were he was one of the first 15 employees. And he came to somebody else, and that person told me, because he didn't want to tell me directly, but he said, I couldn't believe we are here. I couldn't believe that what I said 2 years ago, it was not going to be possible. It was possible, and we did it, and it works. And, that's absolutely incredible. I think, and that's another thing which I just wrote it in a speech, which I'm going to deliver, I think, next week. But I haven't practiced that speech, so I will not say the same way. We had the best successes of this company when we were at the lowest points. So when we were at the lowest points, that's when everything happened. We were at the lowest point when 3 things happened for us, which were, in a way or another, they were historical, locally or internationally. Mm-hmm. So in November, December 2021, 3 huge things happened to us at the worst possible, at the moment when we were all absolutely down. We proved, one of them was, and it actually got public. Give a bit of context, no blind individual in the world ever went to a large store on their own. A large store is simply way too complex for a blind individual. You can only go there with a human companion. You can't even go there with a guide dog. It's simply too complex. We did a demonstrator, one of the international store chains. We did a pilot in which blind individuals were able to go into the store, say what they want, and be led by the system, and were able to proficiently use a large store as typical people which have visual capabilities are. It was the first time in history when that happened. 3 weeks later, we closed the biggest investment round which we ever had. And between these two, it was roughly a month, so 4 weeks between these two. And between these two, in the middle, we get the Red Dot Award Luminary. And then 1 week after the last one, we found out that we were the first company to win funds from the European Innovation Council, the most prestigious deep tech accelerator in the world. So, in an interval of a month, we proven that impossible is possible. We became the best in the world in industrial design. We raised the biggest equity investment of any startup in Romania, and then we won the biggest investment ever of a pre-revenue startup in Romania. And it all happened in a month and a half. So those were at the beginning. At the beginning of that time, I was thinking if we even have a future and if we're gonna be there in 3 months. At the end of it, I had a very good New Year's Eve. So all of it was in 6 weeks, and it was so bad that people were not even in the company were even mentioning how bad it was. They were just everybody was trying to pull their own weight and to do what they can, and it transformed into being the best thing ever. I can't wait for something. I can't. It's not that I want something like that to happen again because we were very low back then. But I want that high to feel it again because it was absolutely incredible, and it even transformed to a more complicated thing afterwards. Because I remember the 12th of December, it was on a Sunday. I shook hands with the main investors of the round, and on the 14th of December, 3 days later, I found the European Innovation Council tells us that we are the first ones and everything. And if those 2 events would have happened the other way, 2 days, just 2 days, we would not be existing anymore. Why? Because we were in the first batches, there was not a predictable amount of time from the moment we won the money until we got the money. Yeah. That was not predictable. We, in our mind, okay, we get the money in 6 months or less. It was more. And if we wouldn't have signed the investment deal before, and those 2 events would have happened the other way, I would say, okay, I want this money. I don't need the investment money anymore. We wouldn't have enough runway to survive. So, and it's actually true for some other companies from our batch, which had this opportunity and did the other way, and then it disappeared. Damn. And that was pure luck. Those 2 days were what kept this company going, and it was a complete accident. And of course, all of these things which happen when they happen, you don't really think about it, or you don't really have a methodology when they happen. But then years later, you discover there was a methodology, there was something there, and then you begin telling why it's good to do it like this and not like that and everything. And I'm a hypocrite on that, and everybody else is, because back then it was not like any of that was predictable. It was not like we had a methodology. It was like those two things happened by pure luck this way. But of course, as a public speaker, you know how to transform it into a very nice story. But yeah, that's an interesting thing. And I think this is really something which you can see, I think, in all personal development books. Whenever I read a book like that, I'm like, okay. So these things happen by accident, and then you wrote them in a way which sounded like they were not by accident. But for us, of everything then, it was no. I think that's one of the most spiritual experiences I had was what happened during those 6 weeks. And those 6 weeks enabled us to be here and enabled us to change history continuously.
I think that's the beauty of innovating, of entrepreneurship, combining the lows with the highs. That's the beauty of it. Like, think if you didn't have that low, how would the experience have been of the high? It wouldn't have been the same.
Most probably. Yeah. But I'm looking forward to that high. I'm not looking forward to that low.
Yeah.
But it has been lows. I mean, even
the lows change. Like
the lows definitely change. But I'm thinking of at some point, getting funding for a pre-revenue startup, which requires millions to develop a product in Romania. That's unheard of. We are the first ones showing that this is even possible. We didn't think it was possible. And then we got all the money in the world. And it doesn't mean we ran out of problems. No, we still have enough problems. And we still had incredible lows afterwards. Scaling the company, horrible, absolutely horrible. Recruiting so many people, even if whenever one of the unwritten rules, but actually I think it's written somewhere, is that we always develop the company for the next phase. So when we were 10, it was developed for being 30. When we were 30, it was developing for being 60. And now we are developed for being roughly 150 to 200. We still have a few check boxes to check, but we're going to be ready for that. We always develop this company process-wise and organization-wise and everything to accommodate it being larger than it is. So we always did that in advance. I think at somewhere during the last months, it was a point when those two things clashed and we were not as prepared as I wanted to be because a lot of but a lot of other issues kept us from focusing on that. And now we're recovering from that and preparing the company for the next phase, which is 100 plus employees company, which is a completely different thing. And other things happened historically in my experience before Lumen in the corporate world or in other ventures which I'm part of. I actually started with small teams, I started with large teams, going to small teams, going to huge teams, going back to small teams. So I kind of got a bit of everything. But at very different times. In university, I led a sound, light, and stage company which organized events. We organized roughly 100 events a year. I was a student. Everybody was a student. It was like a student-run business, but it worked very good. But I learned a lot about what motivates people back then, or a lot about what motivates people of that age group back then, because we were all students. Before that, I founded the first and the largest robotics high school robotics club in Romania, where I had like 150 students, and I learned a lot about what motivates people which are younger than that. At least back then. Now things have changed a bit. But then I quickly went to the corporate world, where in months I went from being a senior engineer into leading a tremendous amount of people and multiple hierarchy levels and everything. And that taught me a lot, but also isolated me from a lot of skills which I wished I had now.
How is innovation different in bigger companies, in such big companies like those? How is it different from the startup innovation world?
The interesting thing, which I just don't get people on this. People tell me that they hate corporations and they don't want to be there, and I hear this from people who never worked in a corporation, but also from people being in a corporation. They hate corporations and everything. I just don't understand. I mean, I do understand up to some level. First of all, a corporation, let's take a 20,000+ corporations, because there are smaller things. On that level, you can't judge the entire company, the entire corporation from one location or from one person or from one boss or you can't judge it from that. corporations are absolutely great on some things. Entrepreneurship is something which I strongly encourage, and which I saw how it works. I've funded a lot of things in entrepreneurship. Some of the largest budgets I ever controlled in my life were as an entrepreneur. The largest amount of people I ever had in my responsibility was as me being an entrepreneur. And there are immense opportunities in the corporate world. However, the context created there is not the most appropriate. Corporations, they're in a bit of a different game. A corporation is in the game of lasting the longest. A startup at the beginning is in the game of gaining the most as quickly as possible. One is about very, sustainability for tens of years, and some of them can have plans for tens of years, and some cannot. In an entrepreneurial environment, you have so much safety nets which you don't have in the entrepreneurial way. In the entrepreneurial way.
Yeah.
Those safety nets sometimes they make some people to be comfortable, and sometimes the lack of them makes some people not think correctly. There's an immense opportunity, and some corporations have seen this and have done it very, very well. I mean, for example, let's look at Apple. Apple is growing as a startup, and they're a huge company, and they can still grow. Nobody knows how. I mean, some people know, but they don't really talk about it. But other companies, 3M had something like that. And then there are companies which were startups and they grew very, very well, like Google and everything. But I wouldn't really say Google is innovative anymore, unfortunately. I think they got incredibly lucky with one product line, and then that permitted them to experiment a lot. And some of those experiments worked, of course. I mean, when you're investing in 100 things, one would work. But thinking of the corporate world, so you have a lot of people which are, let's put it, comfortable, because in the last 20 years, things were a bit more comfortable. A lot of people which know that their role is incredibly small. That's an unfortunate thing in a corporate world. It's very good at defining very well what you have to do, and not necessarily because they want to, but because psychologically it happens, they make you stay between some boundaries. They don't want to make it. I mean, I was in the management, the highest management level possible. It's not that the management wants you to stay in those. It's just that at the scale, that's how it works. And when you have these boundaries and they become psychological boundaries, it's very, very hard for you to come out of those boundaries, to be inspired to do other things, and to begin doing them. So the way a corporation is set up, it allows people to be comfortable in a way which is not proficient for innovation. There are activities, and a lot of corporations are working towards that, making activities and programs and everything which allows employees to maybe come out a bit of that and be a bit more innovative, come up with ideas. But then comes the clash in another direction. I'm coming from the automotive field. In the automotive field, if you have an idea now, you can test it in 7 years. That's the reality. If you run proper market feedback, it takes 7 years. MedTech is similar. I mean, it takes that amount of years. I think we do it a bit fast, like 4 years from idea to product. But we were able, because of the way we were set up, to test it iteratively. In a large corporation coming from a very heavily regulated field like aviation, aeronautics, automotive, medical, there are thorough processes which are there for the safety of everyone. And the way which those processes are understood and put in practice, it means that from the moment you have an idea to the moment you can test it, it's a very long way. And the corporations are set up to accommodate that very long way, like 7 years of time. And they have the resources to keep 7 years on that. The problem is that if it takes 7 years for somebody who's highly, highly motivated about the idea to prove the idea works, everybody gets discouraged in that amount of time. So in the normal way of working, which is required to stay like this, because if we will shorten this amount of time to less, there will be more accidents, there will be more people killed, unfortunately, by technology and everything. So it's good in that standpoint. Some companies have found ways of making it better. For example, Tesla has the same regulations, but they work a bit better because they have a bit of a different methodology, which comes from software, not from hardware manufacturing. So there's also a bit of folklore coming in. So you can optimize the process, but still, even for Tesla, it takes years to have a product on the market from the ground up, because that's the amount of time it takes to have a proper process which is traceable, which satisfies all the requirements which again are there to keep humans from harm, so they're not bad. But at the beginning of an idea phase, you can't apply this process. But at the same time, you can't allow, and I fully understand, you can't allow the people being part of this process to suddenly do incredible shortcuts because they will affect the quality of the main process. And the main process, the process which gives money, and the process which keeps people safe. So the compromises which we have tried in corporations is to take people from that context, to take them from their place, put them on a parallel track, and highly innovative track, call it however you want. And it's an incubator, it's an accelerator, it's an idea hackathon, it's whatever it is, a billion names, and allow them to have the mental space in which here you can experiment, but it's not the same as your work. Here's a place where you can experiment. Here's a place where you can do things faster. Here's a things where you can find shortcuts, etc. And then when they reach product, if they reach product stage perfectly, then we go back to the process, and then 7 years later the product is there. Or if you fail, no problem. We assume that some of you will fail. You can come back to your day-to-day job and be back. What we can't do is to intercalate these things. You can't. I mean, in some companies it works if you're not in a heavily regulated field, but you're in a heavily regulated field. You can't have the people working on life safety things, having fun in an incubator in the same time. You have to separate that. So a lot of people hate that in a corporation or the small wheel, which does that in some examples. But that small wheels and that small wheels and how it works with that small wheel and with that small wheel at the end makes sure that people don't die, and that the company will survive another 100 years. Now with all the changes that are happening in technology, that 100 years is discussable, but still that's a thing which I think I learned a lot in the corporate environment, as me being part of a corporation, and then as a consultant working with, I think at this point, 50 corporations in innovation consultancy.
Okay. We need to talk on this subject afterwards.
It's a big subject.
But you mentioned Apple, and how they're doing things differently. And it's. I'm just curious if it's only about the think differently part. But why do you think they're able to innovate and continuously innovate? What makes them different? And it is because they think differently. But what else?
I think differently. It was also a marketing slogan which worked very well.
Yeah.
What's Apple doing differently? I'm still observing Apple, and I still don't have the recipe, because if I would, I mean, even if I would, it would work in other places. I mean, some things work for some places. It doesn't mean that there's a recipe which works for everybody. What we do very well at Lumen, I don't think it works for other companies. Because it's about the vision which we have, is because of the motivation of the people we have, is because of the people we have, and that's not really replicable in other places. Apple has some uniqueness, I think, in the way their management works. The top managers of Apple, from what I was able to understand, are the people which were incredibly good at their craft, and they were promoted in a position where the best technical people were taught leadership and everything. And that's how they went in being in the senior roles, so they can have a very good technical grasp of what is happening. That was one of the things. Another thing is the importance of design. The industrial design studio of Apple is the best industrial design studio in the world. Now that Johnny Ive has left, it's discussable, but I still think it's the best industrial design studio in the world. It's the fact that design was so high in the company, and the design was leading the product and not the product, the design. I mean, looking at a development cycle, even for us, I think did the same thing, and I'm not sure if it's the correct one. We first put the technology, and we assemble it as small as we can, and then we send it to the industrial designers to make a beautiful case. That's not how design should work. Design starts from that, and then from everything else. And that's something which Apple does, I think, very, very well. I mean, now, discussable, the automotive industry works similarly. You start with the design of a new car. However, you start the design of a new car knowing that you'll have this engine, these wheels, this transmission, these batteries now, this interior. So they are very limited in terms of that. I think the industrial team of Apple has absolutely no limits at this point. And looking historically, I'm looking at the Apple Macintosh team back in 1980 to 1984 when Steve was leading the Apple Macintosh team. The people in that team, they were 21 to 25 years old. There were some seniors, but they were very young, and we actually scared how young they were. They were the best people of their age in the world. Highly motivated, had the physical energy to pull up all the nights they worked on that. Because I think if they were a bit older, they wouldn't be able to do that. What they did back then, led by a mad genius, which Steve was, and together they ended up with a product which was absolutely great, which was completely changing, well, stealing some ideas, taking some ideas from other people, but in the end, developing something which is absolutely amazing. And the amount of conflict it created between the Apple II team, which was the money, the milk cow, I think is the expression of the company, which was making a lot of money, developed by senior engineers and everything, but mostly for people mostly for clients which were a bit more proficient in the computer use. And then the Mac team, which had, the Mac team wanted to cannibalize this team, and the Apple II team was the one which was paying for the Mac team. So it was a very, very big conflict. But it ended up with some of the most amazing technology in the world, which didn't properly work, but still was some of the most amazing technology in the world. And it paved the way for more senior people to take that and to transform it into something which was possible.
Is motivation different?
Yes.
That's the thing that I can
Motivation
identify.
is one of them. But motivation and optimism is one of them.
And yeah. But in how Apple behaved, for them, it was more important to innovate and create great experiences than to milk that cow as long as possible.
Well, they had the safety of the cow which was being milked. that was creating the safety for them to innovate. But now let's look at Apple post Steve. Steve, at the end of the company, 50,000 people, one person makes a difference, but it's not a person developing the product. But he was involved in developing the product. He was involved, and he had a genius eye for that. But he was giving the right directions for the other 20, 30,000 engineers to put them in practice. But then after Steve, the company grew more after Steve than before Steve. So then comes the business of business development, then comes the business of logistics. And I think the business of logistics, very few people realize that behind these products, it's the amount of genius in all the fields which accompany it are huge. I don't think there's any other logistics as complex as what is in developing the MacBook even more than the iPhone. The manufacturing process for that, those were never believed to be scalable. They are scalable. I mean, to have CNC machine stainless steel components on millions of products, never heard of before. The MacBook is absolutely amazing piece of engineering, and there is a reason why there's no other aluminum laptop in the world. Nobody knows how to do it. Nobody knows how to scale it at that point. To have a product which is developed in the 100 million replications per year, and it takes months to develop it, months to build it, and nobody know about it. That's a level of secrecy which I think that even the US Army can't have. So there are so many genius things there which are not even related to the product development, which very few people, except the people in the industry, see, which are as amazing. And I actually had a very amazing breakthrough last week or 2 weeks ago. I have the MagSafe battery, which is a plastic battery you put on your iPhone to enhance the battery life. And of course, I have a MacBook. And for some reason, I was in the conference and it was as boring as every other conference. So I began playing with things. I had my MacBook open and I put my MagSafe battery on top of it. And the margin, the radius of the curvature of the battery for an iPhone, completely different product line, and the MacBook were exactly the same. And I was like, no company in the world can even pass requirements from two different teams to another and without conflict. And these people were able to have the two products from completely different fields of the company have the same dimensions. And that's just marvelous how they do it. And very few people realize that very small thing is actually such a huge cultural organizational thing, which very few companies, I think, are able to replicate. I mean, you get accessories now you look at phones which don't have their buttons straight, or they don't have their, if they have two plugs, they're not at the same level. And Apple has two different product lines which have the same dimensions. That's a lot related to the industrial design bureau of Apple, but still, it's absolutely amazing. And also absolutely amazing because I went to my cousin and said, look at this thing, it's incredible, and nobody realized that this is more incredible than maybe what we are doing here, because it is incredible in an organization of 100,000 to get people from completely two corners of the globe to completely two corners of the organization work with the same things. That really blew my mind, and it showed just why Apple is Apple.
I tie it to the incredible vision that they have. Like it's everlasting. It's timeless, and that vision creates it's a next level of coherence between the teams. Like that small detail shows how big the vision is and how dedicated they are to that vision. And following up on that, can you share more about Lumen's vision?
Sure. So basically, we build products that make the life of people better. That's what we do. We are focusing heavily on disabilities and we chose the worst disability, in my opinion. Being blind is one of the worst disability. And also selected it because nobody was doing something in that area. It was simply too difficult. And we said, okay, if it's too difficult, it's for us. So I would actually go a bit into our values. We have 4 values in the company. And the first one kind of happened, the first value. The first value is make meaning, not money. That's our first value. We don't care about the money. We care about building products that help people. And if we know that if we help people, we're going to get to money. So it's make meaning, not money. Money will come after. That was the first thing. And it kind of leads what we do. Whenever we're developing, our business development is the smallest department in the company. Our R&D is the biggest department in the company. And we're going to keep it that way. Because we believe that if we truly solve a problem, you truly build a product that solves a problem and enhances the lives of people, inevitably you'll get to money. The second value is design, not made. We design things. We don't just make things. And that's really related to the way I do things. Whenever I do something, I just go the extra mile of doing it a bit better and preparing it for the next phase. For example, the companies mostly always prepare for the next growth phase. And that comes in terms of process, in terms of design, in terms of organizational culture, in terms of everything. We prepare it for the next phase. And the same with everything I personally do, and more people in the company adopt it as well. They build it for the following thing. They don't build it to solve the problem now. They build it to solve the problem now and to build upon it in the future. And that's one of it. The third one is no experts. We actually just renamed it, but we renamed it to no experts, and it's about multidisciplinarism. So I hate experts. I truly hate experts because of the simple thing that experts can't innovate. Why? If all you do is to be very good into one field, you'll never be able to make those simple connections with the other things. So we always encouraging bringing our hobbies to work. We always encouraging doing things together or not even together, which enhance our lives. I mean, if you go to our building, you'll find musical studios. You'll find our pets around us. You'll find our kids around us. You'll find our Lego collections. You'll find out the place where we have accidentally or not necessarily accidentally set the building on fire 3 times. We bring our hobbies to work so we can learn from each other's hobbies. And you got really diverse. I mean, music is a huge one. It's coming from me and a lot of other musicians in the building. But we went into sewing, creative things, a lot of collections of plants in the building and other things. I mean, we have a large building at this point. Now we have our own clubs in the building where they can use the lumen equipment to build things which they want. So some of us are building planes in the building. Some of us were building, how should I even say this? Some of us were building something close to a glitter bomb in the building.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, the last party we had to Police came 2 times the last party last week. Let's put it this way. We have a lot of fun. I just bought a professional sound system for a large band, and we wanted to test it. And the police came because of a report from a mile away. So yeah, half of Cluj was listening to my music.
Work hard, play hard. I live by that.
So that's no experts. We really encourage people to do new things and to try new things and not to become an expert in what they do. And the last one is connected by trust. We don't have a work schedule. Everybody works whenever they want. We kind of try to meet every now and then at some meetings, which we do have. We trust each other to do the best work of their lives, and we trust that if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something, and inevitably if you ask me to do something, I'm going to be late, but that's another topic. We are where we are because we went to hell together, and we have the trust that we will still be here if we're going to go to hell again. And that really creates how do I say it even in English? It creates a fraternity of what we do and in what we do, and we trust each other. Even if we don't say it, we know that we can trust each other.
It's a special bond.
It is. It's a special bond. I mean, we went to hell a few times, and we're going to go to hell again, most probably. But on the way, we created some technology which changes the lives of people, and we put Romania on maps where it was never before.
It's incredible. I see that there are like 5 minutes, and I want to be sure that I tackle these questions. The vision of that lumen. Mm-hmm. Now think of the furthest future away in time, and how that future is being changed by the existence of that lumen.
Sure. So the thing is that there are some things which I can make public and some things which I can't. So I will try to keep the things which I can make public. But I want to make a remark. When you develop technology, this is so interesting. What we do is immensely complicated technologically, but it works marvelously. But at the end of the day, it uses parts of technology which, there was a part there, there was a part there, there was a part there, a part there, and we found a unique way to put them together, and we developed a lot on those unique ways of putting them together. But why did we develop on those unique ways? Because we had such a different challenge. Never before somebody tried to use those technologies for solving issues for people with a visual impairment. And when you shift your mind from a very visual world to a very non-visual, non-visual world, then it makes your mind think a bit different. It makes you build solutions which are a little different. And in taking this immense task of taking autonomous driving and scaling it to something you can wear on your head, and then that thing which you wear on your head to give non-visual feedback to people which don't have visual perception, that really made us push some technologies further. And of course, we see so many reuses of those technologies. We see reuses of those technologies in military, which is not the direction we really want to go. We see those reuses in solving other disabilities, or not solving, but enhancing the lives of people with those specific disabilities. We see a tremendous amount of reuse in a lot of fields, which we might or might not have business cases for. And for now, the simplistic future is that there are 40 million blind people out there, 39,970,000 of them don't have a guide dog. We want to offer those people the same benefits as the guide dog. That's a simplistic goal which we have. My first actually goal, like the milestone when I will be able to say that my job is done, and it will never be done, but anyway, is we are professionally training guide dogs for 100 plus years. We have guide dogs for over 5,000 years. And the most guide dogs that were ever in existence on this world was 28,000. The moment there will be more than 28,000 lumen glasses enhancing the people's lives, we change the paradigm which is thousands of years old. And that's the goal which I'm looking for. And it's a goal which is so close, and I just can't wait to achieve it, because that's the moment when, most people in the world were raised knowing that the guide dog is the solution for the blind. From that moment, the guide dog will not be the only solution for the blind. That's the moment I can't wait for. And for Lumen will continue to make meaning, not money, by helping people. That's what Lumen will do. Now, there are a lot of directions in which we can help humans. I was mentioning that you have 40 million blind people, or actually more, and also 290 million people which have some reminders of vision. Those reminders might still be usable to give a bit of context of something we're thinking of, or developed, or have been developing, or we already have it. Who knows? And at the same time, there are multiple things which we can do with the technology, but I just don't want to go into them.
How does a day in that future look different because that lumen exists for the everyday person, or the everyday person that is impacted by your technology? And I know it's a broad question, but
I think there are two answers. One is for the person which is directly impacted by the technology. The person which is directly impacted by technology, so people with disabilities, they will have better education, better employment, and better social life. Those are the three things on which we are targeting, and is what Lumen permits. The Lumen glasses specifically permits, so for people with disabilities to have better education, better employment, and better social life. And in all of them, we find use cases and everything which we prepare the glasses for. And for the people which are not directly impacted, not the users of our technology, most of everything, I want them to be inspired that somewhere in a country in East Europe, which has nothing to do with innovation, nothing to do with startups, nothing to do with fundraising, nothing to do with assistive technologies, there were some crazy people who said we're going to change the lives of millions of people, and they did. And if they were able, then I will be able also to do great things. That's what I want the other people, which are not the direct users of Lumen, to get from us.
For people that want to do that and they have a big vision that they want to accomplish, what would be your small piece of advice with which we end this episode?
Be incredibly stubborn. Yeah, absolutely. I think the number one thing which kept us alive was how stubborn I am, because I simply refuse quitting. So be incredibly stubborn and refuse quitting. That's what kept us going.
That's it. Yeah. It's really interesting that you said that there's this quote that I've been saying for the past 2 months to everyone when talking about motivation,
Okay.
and it's from Jeff Bezos. Maybe you know it.
Let's see.
Be stubborn on vision, but flexible on details.
True.
It's really similar to
True. Be stubborn in quitting. I think that's something which I realized. I just don't know how to quit. I never knew.
incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you for the inspiration, and really thank you for the wonderful conversation we had.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed the episode just as much as I did. And I look forward to our next interesting guests that will talk about how the future will look like through technology innovation. If you have any type of curiosity, if you have any type of guest in mind that you would like to see, please reach out and we'll make it possible. Until then, follow us on social media channels such as LinkedIn and Instagram, and tune in for more episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms. See you soon.